a lot of energy and resources on nothing. So learning how to harvest, when to harvest, and how to prepare things is really essential. And I know you're learning a lot of that in the culinary class, so that's cool. How do you know when to harvest? You got to use your senses. Yeah, a lot of things turn a really beautiful color. Like tomatoes get red, raspberries get red. Some things get to a certain size, so if you're growing a giant pumpkin but it's only this big, you can assume that it's not ready yet. You got to wait a little longer till it gets bigger. So if you look at the seed packets or you know what you're growing, you can kind of make an assessment of whether it's big enough to go to eat. You can also taste a little bit. So maybe you're growing raspberries and you want to see if they're ready. You taste one and see if it tastes ripe. Tenderness or firmness. So some fruits and vegetables need to become a little soft and tender, and some need to harden up. Like pumpkins, for example, they need to get nice and hard, and when you knock on them, they sound like a hollow drum. So that's how you know. And then they also, for pumpkins, the stem dies back a little bit. Some things smell good. Some things look like they should. Like this broccoli looks like a broccoli, so that's kind of a good indicator. Mm-hmm. And some things, like I said, with the pumpkin, you listen to the sound. You knock on it and listen to the sound and see if it sounds ready. Or if you're growing beans, dry beans or something, you rattle them and see if they sound ready. If they rattle, then they're ready. Some things, if you wait too long, they start to die on the vine. So this cucumber, we waited too long and it went from a beautiful green to yellow, and that's how it indicates that it's preparing its seeds to be able to grow again. So when they look like that, it's past their prime and they're ready to save the seeds from it instead of eating those. Apples might get moldy. This is lettuce and it's bolted. That means that it's started to flower. So some things, if you leave it too long, it'll start to flower. The same with this broccoli down here. Some of those it went from being a beautiful broccoli to having yellow flowers appear, and that means we waited too long. These things are still edible, they just don't taste as good at all. This tomato, it started to split. And sometimes that happens when there's irregular watering. But that means it's opened itself up and now bacteria is inside, and you probably don't want to eat that tomato. But if that tomato fell to the ground, it would start growing a new tomato. So sometimes plants, when things are too ripe, it sends it into seed production. So, and then if you leave raspberries too long, they start to mold or they attract fruit flies. So we want to make sure we're harvesting things at the prime time so that we're not wasting all the energy and resources that we spent putting into it. Next. Yeah, if you wanted to grow a new plant, then that's great. So like if my tomatoes do that, I take those little tomatoes off and I throw them where I want a new plant. And then next year it's going to grow a new plant. So
apples are always.
So another way we can tell when things are ripe is looking at a seasonal calendar. So in modern times right now, any grocery store, and you can see bananas and pineapples, and you can see things that aren't necessarily ripe right now because they're coming from New Zealand or Mexico or places where they are ripe, and they're being flown in on an airplane or shipped in on a big truck. So that doesn't necessarily mean they're ripe. It means they're ripe somewhere else, and it's taking a lot of energy to get them here. So one good thing that you can do is know when things are in season, and that means you're getting them the freshest and the most local. That means they're like being grown pretty close by. They're ripe right now, and they just take one little short trip to get to the store or to get to you. So knowing when things are available is really important. Apples are actually not, they're a fall thing, but they store a really, really long time. They can be stored in a big silo. They suck all the air out of it, and they last a really, really long time. Pears too, yeah. So you could get apples pretty much year round, but they're actually August, September, October is when they're actually ripe on a tree. So you can tell, like, July, August is for apricots, blackberries right now, June, July, August. Blueberries are just starting and are getting more ripe into August and September.
Cherries are good.
Yeah, there's lots of pears. So you can see also pears have a long shelf life. That means they can be stored in a facility for a really long time and brought to you fresh. Same with hazelnuts. There's only 2 months when hazelnuts are not available.
Next month and then the month after.
Yeah, and that's when they are done being picked off a tree and being processed for the next year. So potatoes, same thing, they store really, really well. You can cure potatoes and then they last the whole year. So you can get them pretty much year round. Salad greens have a kind of a prime time of growing, but in the right conditions in a greenhouse, you can grow them year round too. So here's some vegetables to look at. You can get mushrooms all year long. They can be grown in a warehouse. They can be grown indoors on a shelf.
I feel like he's only not June.
Garlic? Yeah, that's when you plant garlic. So that's when it's basically, garlic has a really long, I brought some garlic that I grew actually.
I love garlic.
You plant garlic in October and then you harvest it in June or July and then you have to let it cure. So that's why there's a gap here. That's like the curing time. But garlic can be grown, it is grown year round because it takes a really, really long time. Same with onions. Yeah?
Mushrooms grow the entire
Mushrooms can grow
year.
anywhere.
Yeah, mushrooms in the fall is when they're in season outside, when it's damp in the forest, or early spring. But otherwise, you can grow them. A lot of mushrooms are grown in like a big giant facility, like a warehouse, and it's climate controlled. They don't even use soil. They use mushroom medium, and so they can grow them all year long. And they're high in protein, so that's a really great resource, especially here in the Pacific Northwest. There's lots of different mushrooms we can eat. And a lot of this shows like when you would plant something, and then you can kind of infer that information. Like you'd plant cucumber, and then that's when you'd be harvesting. Oops. You'd plant cucumber early in the spring, and then you'd be harvesting in the summer, June through September. Would you like to take it from here?
Sure. Okay, I guess we're just going to talk a little bit about how to store your fruits and veggies when you harvest them or when you get them from the store even, because sometimes people don't know what goes in the fridge, what goes on the counter, what goes in the pantry. And that will just extend their shelf life, so you can keep them for a longer amount of time. You can see they have like their carrots and their celery in water, because if you keep them in water in the fridge, they can last a lot longer than just putting them in the fridge in a bag. So in the pantry, when you bring your groceries home, you want to put your onions, shallots, garlic, hard squash, and potatoes in the pantry, like out of the light and not in the fridge. If you leave your potatoes on the counter, they can start to sprout. I don't know if you've ever seen that before. Like if you leave your potatoes out, they can start to kind of make little vines because they see the sun and they think it's time to grow, but you don't want them to think that. In the fridge, you can put eggplant, celery, peppers, peas, zucchini, cucumber. You can put squash, broccoli, Brussels sprouts, cauliflower, carrots, all that stuff, lettuce and leafy greens, and mushrooms. You can put in a paper bag and leave in the fridge. And these are some of their shelf lives in there, so usually like 3 to 5 days. And on the counter, you just want to put your tomatoes, stone fruit, citrus, and bananas. And then herbs, I like to take my herbs home and like snip the bottoms of them and just put them in a glass with water. Kind of helps them last a little bit longer, and they look kind of cute, like little bouquets of flower. Scallions, you can actually, when you're done using your scallions, you can just stick them in a little cup with water and they'll start to grow new plants out of them. They'll start to grow new scallions. So you can kind of see in these ones that the old one where you cut it off and then they're starting to grow these new ones right at the top. which is so cute and awesome.
So after they get this big, I'll dig a little hole in the garden and stick it in, and it'll grow a whole new plant. So
Very cool.
it's pretty cool that you can regenerate your own. And a lot of vegetables do that. It's not just scallions. You could do it with leeks. You could do it with lots of herbs.
What are scallions?
Scallions are a type of onion. So a lot of people use it as garnish, like chop it up and sprinkle it on the top. They kind of look like the little green circle shape kind of thing. Look like this. They're really nice flavor. It's kind of slow sometimes.
Anyway. Oh. Lettuce, you want to like rinse your lettuce off when you get it home, and then you can put it in a container with a little, like a dry towel on the bottom and a wet towel on the top, and it kind of helps it last a little bit longer. Potatoes, you want to keep them in a drawer, in a basket, or in a paper bag, and you can just keep them kind of tucked away from the sunlight so they won't start to grow new plants. Unless you want them to, then you can do that too. Berries, you want to just store them on a rinsed paper towel or in the original carton. One way to give them an extra bit of life is to soak them in a little bit of vinegar and water, and then drain them and then store them back. They'll last a little bit longer. There's a little chart on where to put things. Oh, and this is you. Do you want to go back?
All right. So it's important to learn how to store things so that you can eat them at their freshest. And a lot of things you can eat, like cauliflower, it said you can store it for a week, but you could eat it like 2 weeks, but it won't have as many vitamins and nutrients. So the longer they are picked and out of the ground and just sitting in your fridge, they kind of like, the less nutrients they get day by day. So you want to eat things at the peak of their freshness and the peak of their nutrients. And if you can't eat them at the peak, then there's a lot of ways that you can preserve them so that they last a little longer. And these days, we can go to the store, we can get pretty much anything in a jar or can or bottle. We don't have to do a lot of it ourselves, but back in the day and in a lot of cultures now, people grow food and they put it in cans and they make pickles, and it's called putting up the harvest. They basically line their pantries with all the things that they've grown, and it lasts them the whole year. So they make soups and they make jams and they make pickles and then put it in their pantry, and it doesn't require refrigeration or any other energy, and they can keep it and have things on hand all year long. So even though most things are ripe in the summer, it is possible to extend your harvest to the whole year by preserving stuff. So there's a lot of different ways you can preserve things. The easiest way is storage, like Delia was talking about, putting things in a pantry or a cellar, cold storage, things like pumpkins and squash, hard squash, onions, garlic, potatoes, even apples. You can put them in the right climate in your house. I put mine in my garage, which stays pretty much consistently the same temperature all year, and they last for a really long time. Some things require curing. So with onions, you'll pull them out of the ground and you'll let them sit in the shade for a couple weeks, and then that cures them. Same with garlic, so that they have a long shelf life. Another thing you can do that's really, really easy, I'm going to talk about the first couple ones here, drying things. So if you have a dehydrator like this one, you can dry things pretty quickly, but you can also use your oven on the lowest setting in a baking sheet, and you cut things very thin and put them in the oven for a couple of hours. And yeah, you can make chips, you can make dried fruit. Yeah, you can make jerky, fruit leather. There's a lot of stuff you can make. I make pizza chips. When I have so many tomatoes in the summer, I'll cut my tomatoes real thin and put herbs and salt on them, and I make pizza chips, and they're really good. You can go in the bathroom? Okay. So drying is a pretty fail-proof way to do things. Another way you can dry stuff is what we've been doing back here. We're going to process these herbs today, but you see all those hanging herbs back there? We basically took a little handful every week, and we tied it with string, and we hung it up upside down, and it's out of direct sunlight, and it has some airflow around it, and it dries it out without using any energy. So that's really cool. That's a great way to dry herbs or flowers or things that are, you can make herb mixes and tea mixes, which is what we're going to make today. So it's so easy, and you don't even have to be growing stuff. Sometimes I'm walking around the neighborhood and I see someone has like some really yummy looking mint, and I'll take a little handful, which is probably not that legal, but I don't think they'd mind maybe. Another thing you could do is freezing. That's a pretty easy one, and everyone has a fridge usually. So if you have a baking pan like this is a great size for the freezer. What you want to do is, we have our little, Delia picked some berries just now. And berries are a great thing to freeze. I like to freeze berries because you usually get a lot really quickly, like right now in June or July. And you can't eat them all that fast, and they spoil pretty quickly. So I'll wash them real good and dry them out, and then lay them on a baking sheet just like this and stick them in the freezer. And what it's going to do is freeze each little one into like a tiny ice cube. And then once they're frozen, you can scrape them off the pan and put them in a bag, and then put them in the freezer. And then anytime you want to make a smoothie or a pie or whatever, you just get a little handful or so, however many you need, out, and they're ready to go. So you can extend your berry harvest through the whole year. Right now I have raspberries and strawberries and grapes from last year in my freezer still. So I'm still working through all those that I processed last year. You can also do vinegar pickling. Everyone's probably had pickles here before, right? Does anyone like pickles? Mm-hmm. Has anyone had any kind of pickles other than cucumber pickles? Have you had like green bean pickles or carrots? Or...
I had pickled garlic before.
Ooh, that sounds fun. The other day I had watermelon rind pickled, which sounds crazy, but it was so good. It was like nice and crunchy. So things that might end up in the compost bin, you could turn into pickles actually. It's really fun to make pickles. I make quick pickles all the time, which is basically just, I'll get to that slide in a second, but it's a very simple thing. You don't have to do any boiling or canning. You just make a vinegar bath and put them in a jar and put them in the fridge. So some of the more complicated ways to harvest things, which you need a little bit more specialized tools or kind of a little more know-how to get it right. But canning, which is basically using pressure or boiling water to seal things in a jar or a can. And those will last a really long time on a shelf like this. So you can make jam, you can make pickles, you can make soup, you can use berries and make like a syrup. And then you just, or like this, I make a lot of tomato sauce like this. And then you seal it up in the jar using steam or boiling water or pressure. And then it lasts on the shelf without any refrigeration for, could be up to years. Fermentation is how a lot of pickles are made, by fermenting with bacteria. You can make sauerkraut that way. It's really healthy for you to have that bacteria for your gut health. You can also preserve things in salt or sugar. Like a lot of meats are preserved in salt, packed in salt, and the salt actually like cures them, so they last a long time. You can immerse things in alcohol or oil. You can make like flavored oils by sticking herb sprigs in them or garlic in it. So there's a lot of ways that you can preserve, and these are things that people have been doing for hundreds of years. So it's pretty cool to learn about them and find old recipes and practice. Come on. Why is it so slow always? Okay. So as I was saying, drying is one of my favorite things. And what I like about it is it makes them really lightweight, because you're basically taking the water out of the plant or the vegetable or fruit. So by removing the water, you're removing a lot of the weight. And so you can, take a bag of apples on a hike, and it weighs like nothing, and then you have a really nice snack.
A lot of the they don't rot. They just get stale.
Yeah, totally. They get kind of rubbery.
Honestly, they're kind of good when
I really like it. It can be dehydrating, so if you eat a lot of dried stuff, you got to make sure you drink a lot of water. So this is a quick and simple method. You can just use your oven. You don't really need any special tools. If you have a dehydrator, it makes it faster, and you can use electricity to run it. I put my dehydrator outside in the summer, and it doesn't even heat up my house. All you need is a baking sheet or some parchment paper, an oven or dehydrator, or you can use the sun or the air like we were talking about with the herbs. A lot of different Italian communities, they sun-dry tomatoes outside. Like if you go to Italy right now in a lot of cities, you'll see like the whole wall is covered in hanging tomatoes. They like dry their tomatoes and process them for the whole year. And they use a lot of tomatoes, so yeah, they're super good. You can dry mushrooms. Mushrooms are awesome. You can make really good mushroom stock from dried mushrooms. One thing you want to make sure is that the food is fully dry. So it should kind of snap when you break it. You don't want it to be rubbery. That means there's still water in it. So you want to get it fully dry. And if it has water in it, it can mold. So we got to get it fully dry. It doesn't work for all fruits and vegetables. I try to use things that aren't super juicy. Like if we put some of these juicy blackberries, they would dry, but half of the good stuff about those is how juicy they are. So I would prefer to freeze these and save the juice than to dry them and get rid of all that good juice. So I do dry tomatoes. Those are pretty juicy, but I cut them very thin, so it's not losing too much. One cool thing about it is you don't need any energy for storage. They can be stored anywhere. It's very lightweight. They store for 6 months to a year. And like I said, that works really good for low juice things, herbs. You can make fruit leather, all kinds of chips. Mushrooms are great dried. And then I also dry herbs and make tea this way. Especially if it's not a sunny day. So like early in the spring, I'll dry a lot of my herbs for tea. Drying herbs and flowers, like I said, you can hang them upside down. One thing you want to do is cut them before they go to flower. You want to choose really healthy looking ones. Try to get ones that don't have bugs on them or brown spots. You can pull off the brown spots if they do. But it's hard to tell once they're dry, if there's any kind of yucky spots. So you kind of want to get it while they're fresh like this. I wouldn't dry this. This has flowers on it. I would probably pick it way before that, but it looks pretty. If they're a bit dirty, you wash them and dry them thoroughly before you hang them up so they don't mold. And hang up in a dry location out of direct sun. You can use twine or a rubber band to connect them. I just put little tacks in my walls and wherever I have spots, or I hang a string like this and hang them up. And then in about 2 to 3 weeks, you can strip all the leaves off and crumble them up and make things out of them. So I make a lot of my own herb mixes or, dried oregano and other things I use in cooking by doing this method. You can also do it with chamomile and other flowers. I have some of those for our tea that we're going to make today, or lavender. So with things like that, with flower buds, you're going to want to lay them really flat. So you pull off just the top of the flower and then lay it flat for a few days. And I usually shake it a little bit here and there just to make sure that all sides are getting dry. Wait, is there one? Oh, I skipped the freezing. So we talked about this a little bit already, but this is a really quick and easy way to store berries. And by individually freezing them like this, you can have a whole bag of frozen strawberries, and it's not like one big ice clump. You have individual strawberries. So I make sure I label them really well. I put how much is in the bag and what date, so you know when you find them again in your fridge how old they are. Some fruit and vegetables require blanching. Does anyone know what blanching is? Yeah. You want to read it? Yes. Do you know what blanching is?
Boiling water and then in ice water.
Is it possible to put some seed, to put some soil and like your small plant and like a egg,
Oh, an eggshell?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, to grow it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you know if you crush up eggshells, it will make like this really good protein? It's really good for your plant.
Yep.
Yeah, calcium.
Yeah, you can also
That's
put
true.
that in like protein shakes and smoothies, and it's really good for you.
Yeah. The thing you want to do with that is you want to bake them for at least 10 minutes first and then grind them up.
Or boil them.
Yeah, you can boil them.
Peel the
Salmonella.
eggshell.
Yeah. Yeah, to get rid of the salmonella. Yeah, that's a great tip. That adds calcium to the soil. I do that with all my tomatoes because tomatoes require a lot of calcium. But yes, Salvador, you can use eggshells to plant seeds. And the cool thing about that is when you're ready to plant them in the ground, you just crush the eggshell and put the whole thing in. And then
Or
it
if
doesn't
you
have a
don't
pot.
eggshells on handy, make an egg.
Yeah, there you go.
Eggs are always good. Put it on a sandwich, lettuce, ham.
So going back to blanching, so some things require blanching, like kale. Can you guys sit up at your seats, please, so I can see you?
I can see from.
Can you sit up on your chairs, though?
And it's really easy to see these because I have like a food court right here.
Would you guys mind sitting on your chairs so I can see you better?
Yeah, it cuts off the blood circulation to my legs.
Okay. Salvador?
I guess we'll just sit somewhere on the ground where they can see us.
Yeah, if you sit over here, then I can see you better, like Nick is doing. That would be cool. So blanching, some things require blanching. I usually blanch my kale or my spinach before I freeze it, and basically you put it in a boiling water for just a few minutes, and you take it out and put it in ice water, and so that cooks it a little bit, but then it quickly stops the cooking, and then you can chop it up and put it in the freezer. And so this is a great method for storing berries, kale, spinach, herbs, zucchini, pumpkin. If I have a lot of basil, I'll chop all my basil, put it in a freezer bag, and then I can make pesto all year. So I love pesto. Does anyone else like pesto?
That's pretty good.
I have a question.
Yeah.
What time is class going to be over?
We go to lunch at 11:50.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, quick pickling. So I touched on this a second ago, but so normal pickles you would want to can, and then you could keep them outside of a fridge. But quick pickling is done entirely in a fridge. So you make them and store them in a fridge, and they don't last very long. They last just a couple weeks. So you want to use them quick, but this is a great way if you have if you go to the farmer's market or the store and you get a little bowl of beans or something, you want to make something yummy out of them. I love making quick pickles. They're really fun. So basically, you make a brine, which is vinegar, water. You can add salt or sugar. You can add garlic or herbs. You can add all kinds of stuff to flavor it, but it's the base is vinegar and water. And then you sink all of your vegetables or fruit into it. You can cut them up. Just make sure they're all covered by the vinegar. And then you seal it up and put it in the fridge. And in a couple of days, you have pickles. The vinegar penetrates the vegetable, and they taste amazing. I like to do this with red onions, and then it makes a really good topper for like a taco or something. Dilly beans are one of my favorite things ever. I make vinegar dill green beans, and they're just so crunchy and so tasty. It's a great summer snack. You can do it with tomatoes. I sometimes make green tomato pickles, which can turn into like a kind of tomatillo sauce or like green salsa verde. So the next thing we're going to talk about is saving seeds. So saving seeds is an awesome way to save money on seeds. Seeds are really expensive. So if we can save the seeds of the things that we really liked one year, or that your neighbor grows that you like, or your friends or your grandma or whoever, if you save the seeds, you can grow them again for free. And as you're saving seeds, you're adapting those plants to our climate. So if I grow a tomato and it does really well during the heat wave, the seeds that I save from that tomato are going to be more resilient to heat next year because they've learned to thrive in those conditions. So year over year, you're adapting those seeds to be more resilient and more strong in our growing conditions. So it's really a cool practice to create really strong plants. You can also share them. So if you really were like, this was an amazing pepper I grew, I'm going to share those with all the people who I know who love peppers. You can save the seeds and give them away. Because usually you'll get way more than you can use in 1 year.
That's 50 cents.
Yeah, or you can sell them. You could totally sell them. You can grow something new that you saw elsewhere. You don't know how many times I'm like walking around and I see a really cool flower and I see there's some seeds and I'll put some in my pocket and then I'll bring them home and grow them. So seeds are abundant and they're free, and most places are really happy to share seeds with you. And you're also increasing biodiversity by increasing the amount of different kinds of seeds you're growing. If you go to the store, you see only one kind of banana, you see only one kind of pepper. That's one out of hundreds of kinds that there are. So there's lots of different diversity that maybe doesn't have a good shelf life for a store, but you could grow it in your garden and eat it fresh. So how do we save seeds? First of all, you want to find the healthiest plants or fruits. You don't want to take seeds from something that looks rotten or smaller than normal. You want to find the biggest, healthiest looking one. That one is going to have the best seeds.
You can take out the seeds and eat the rest.
Yeah, a lot of things you can. You want to avoid plants that crossbreed, like brassicas, which is like kale and broccoli, and those kinds of plants, they can crossbreed with each other, and then you're going to get something new. So if you save seeds from that, it could be a good experiment, but you might not get the plant that you intended.
With roses, you can get some really interesting results.
Oh yeah, hybridization is a really cool thing, but
Black roses.
you just want to be aware.
Cabbage.
Because some things like squash, if two squash plants from the same family cross, they could create something that's a little bit toxic. So you want to be careful with saving things from squash. Unless you're only growing one kind of squash, then you know it's from that.
Broccoli, cabbage, and kale are all derived from the same original plant.
Yeah, they are. And Brussels sprouts, and cabbage, and mustard greens, they're all from the same. So you can start with easy things like tomatoes, beans, peas, lettuce, flowers. Those are all really easy to save. Tomatoes take a little bit more. You have to ferment the seeds in order to make them viable. So what you're going to do is squirt the seeds out into a bowl, cover it with a little bit of water, put a top on it, and in a few days it creates like this moldy film, which is pretty gross. But you rinse that off, let the seeds dry, and then they're ready to plant. So it takes a little bit of processing, but you can grow. If you have an amazing tomato going and you want to save those seeds, it's so worth it. With things like cucumbers and squash, the fruit actually needs to get like overripe for them to be ready to save the seeds. So by getting overripe, it's starting to ferment inside of the vegetable, and that means they're getting ready. So there's wet versus dry seeds. The ones I just talked about, tomatoes, squash, usually a lot of the seeds that are inside of a wet vegetable, that's a whole different process of saving seeds than dry seeds. So with wet ones, they need to be partially fermented and then dried to be able to be planted. Whereas things from dry, things like beans and kale and sunflowers, they just need to fully dry out in order to be viable. So knowing the difference is important. But I like to start with things that are dry because it's pretty easy. You can see the seeds, you can tell they're ready. Makes it really easy to process them. So once you pick all the seeds out, then you need to winnow, which means using wind, or you can use your hands, or you can use a sifter. But you need to use some kind of mechanism to separate the seeds from the rest of the plant parts. So depending on what kind of seed, sometimes seeds are heavy and the plant parts are light, and you can just blow on them and the plant parts all disappear and the seeds are left. That's called winnowing. Some people do that with a basket out in the breeze or with a fan. Sometimes you can just pick out the seeds. Sometimes I just leave them and then I just plant all of it and the seeds will grow. And the rest will just become compost. Make sure you label and put the name of the plant and the date so that you know what it is, because you'll be surprised how quickly you can forget what's what. A lot of times I'll put something in a cup and then 3 days later I'm like, I have no idea what that thing is. I have to throw it away or just it'll be a surprise plant. And then you can store in a cool, dark location. If you're a professional seed saver, you store things in a sub-zero fridge. But I usually just put them in my garage with all the other things I store. or you could put them in your regular refrigerator. So as long as it's cool and dark and dry, you're good to go. And seeds can sometimes last for years. So different kinds of seeds have different shelf lives. Onions only last 1 year, but there's been archaeological digs where they found squash seeds and they still grew like thousands of years later. So if kept in the right conditions, they can really last a long time.
That's cool.
Yeah, it's really cool. So there's a lot of like anthropologists who they find seeds when they're doing research on ancient cultures and they're trying to grow things and starting. So recently there was like a squash, one of the original squashes that was grown from a seed that was like hundreds of years old. So it's pretty cool what you can do with seeds. All right, we have a little game before we do our activity.
I don't know if it'll work on there.
Oh, do you need yours?
Yeah.
Another thing I wanted to show you while we're getting set up with our game is these are the grow lights that you guys get to bring home. Yeah, everyone's going to get one of these. You also get a seed starting tray that looks similar to those down there. It has a lid so you can create like a mini greenhouse on your shelf as seeds are getting started. And then you'll get this little grow light that can go on your desk and you can grow your little plants right on your desk.
We're getting our very own, like, those lights?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
And I brought all these plants today, so if you guys want to start with some plants that are already starting to grow like this.
I remember when we planted those.
Yeah, look how big they are now.
Yeah, mine was a bunch of herbs.
Yeah, we have all the herbs. So I can tell you what all these are. We can label them. You can take them home and put them under your new grow lights and grow them on your counter, or you can put them in your garden. All right, everyone, we're almost done with the lesson part, so let's pay attention. Delia has a little game here.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, we're just gonna choose where all these little guys go. Does anyone know where an apple would go? Would it go in the fridge?
Yes,
The
the
counter.
fridge, right away fridge.
Wait, pantry.
Counter.
No,
No,
the counter.
the fridge.
We always
Counter.
put. I always put the.
I put
My
apples in my
apples
fridge.
on the
They
counter.
said the counter in the lesson.
It's true, it is the counter. Some people do put them in the
Yes.
fridge.
I put them in the fridge and they last.
If you cut them, if you slice them, then you probably want to put them in the fridge after that.
So remember, I was saying they last a whole year if they're stored correctly. So by putting them in the fridge, you can get them to last a lot longer at home too.
And congratulations, you're eating healthy while in apocalypse.
Yeah.
What about a little potato? Where would you put that?
Pantry.
Pantry.
You don't want it.
Pantry.
You don't want it to be in sunlight, or else it'll
It
start.
doesn't need to be in
That's
the
true,
refrigerator,
yeah.
but you don't want it in light.
And did you know that if it starts growing those little things, you can cut them off and dry them? You have to dry them first, so you have to make a hard callus on the outside. But once they're dry, you can plant them, and that'll make a whole new potato plant.
I'll have a bunch of, you know how, like, on either the second or the fourth day, you have these, like, jars, and you were putting seeds in them?
Yeah.
Yeah, I got a pack of carrot seeds from you guys, and then I got a bunch of jars when I went on vacation because I like jars and stuff. So I just put some water in there and I put the seeds in there.
Oh, nice.
That's cool.
Have they started to sprout?
No, I just did it a couple days ago.
Well, now you can use your grow lights and actually start growing the carrots. That's so awesome.
Okay.
In the grow kit, there's a whole bunch of seeds for you to experiment with too.
Yay.
Okay, guys, where would you put a little mango?
Fridge.
Fridge. Well, it depends.
A mango is like a fruit fly's dream.
That's
That is true. I have a mango on my counter right now, but that means I gotta eat it.
Depends.
Yeah,
Yeah.
if you're gonna eat it fast, you could put it on the counter, but I'd put it in the fridge.
I prefer the fridge because it makes it nice and cold.
Yeah, makes it good.
What about a carrot?
Fridge.
Oh yeah.
All of them up until banana are fridge.
Would you do anything to it in the fridge or just throw it in the fridge?
Just put it in water.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You can put it in the water in the fridge.
You can also just put it in the fridge, but
It
it
lasts.
is nicer to leave it in water.
Yeah.
If you put
You
it
get that
just,
like white kind of film on the outside if it doesn't have any water with it or moisture.
yeah, or if you put it just straight up in the fridge, it can get kind of bendy pretty quick.
Yeah, it gets dry.
Mhm.
It doesn't
Yeah.
like snap as
Yeah, it needs to
Yes.
stay in the crisper. If you got one of those. How about some lettuce?
Fridge.
Or pantry.
But what you can do with it is you can put, you can rinse it off and then put a dry paper towel on the bottom of the container, then put the lettuce on, and then put a wet paper towel on top.
Yeah, that's so
Awesome.
true.
And then
Ooh, that's making me hungry for a crispy salad.
Yeah, I guess we got another lettuce right here. We can put that in
I
the
think
fridge.
the first one might have been
Something with
spinach.
this building doesn't come out.
It's kind of like,
Butter.
I think this might be, the emoji is like a bok choy, like a cabbage or something. But okay, what about a tomato?
Tomato.
oh, counter.
Yeah,
Yeah.
counter.
So tomatoes will lose flavor if you put them in the fridge. So never put a tomato in the fridge, especially if it's freshly grown. You'll lose all that amazing flavor that you get.
When I have diced and like sliced, I have diced tomatoes and sliced tomatoes or like chopped tomatoes, a bunch of stuff like that. When they're cut, I put them
There you go. Yeah.
then they'll be bad.
Yeah,
Yeah.
totally. Yeah, usually if anything's cut up, you kind of want to put it in the fridge pretty quickly.
Banana goes on the counter. Right
Yeah,
away.
counter.
Banana goes on the
Right away. Right away, it's on the counter.
I don't know where else we could put.
Lemon and orange are on the counter too.
That's true.
I mean, can be.
Yeah, I put my lemons in the fridge. But
Yeah, me too.
Always on
You
the
do? You put your lemons in the fridge?
Lemon.
also
They last
pears
a
are
little
on the
longer.
counter.
Yeah. That's true.
Yeah, so pears, when you pick them, most pears are not ripe right off the tree. They'll never get ripe on the tree.
Alright.
So they have to sit on a counter, sometimes up to 6 weeks. It's the same with like persimmons. I don't know if anyone's had a persimmon
Those
before.
are so
Yeah, they
good.
give that for snack here sometimes.
Oh, really? Wow.
Like stuff.
Persimmons
Yeah.
are so good.
They're really good when
They're really good.
When
I
you
haven't
dry
had them
them
for so long.
on a
Oh, yeah.
line, they're like so good.
I've had them for about
What about an onion? Where'd an onion go?
Counter.
Pantry.
Pantry.
Yeah,
pantry.
pantry.
We just throw everything in the fridge.
Well, I'm glad you're here learning.
Yeah.
You got this recorded.
Pears go in the counter.
Pears
Yeah, I
by the
already
counter.
said that.
Yeah, pears could go on the counter.
Yeah.
I do like my oranges cold though.
What about herbs?
Pantry.
Yes.
You hang them upside down in the pantry.
Yeah, so is the
Hang
garlic.
upside
They
down
can
in the
go in the
pantry, and then you can
the
crush
garlic
them
can
and
go
put
in
them
the
into spice
pantry
things.
or the fridge, so it's really hard to tell.
You can also
Actually-
crush up herbs and put them into spice tins.
Yes.
You can. So yeah, herbs you can dry them. You could dry them in the pantry,
The garlic.
or you could put them in a. You could cut the bottoms and put them in a glass with water and put them in the fridge.
That too.
Yeah.
Yeah, it depends on what you want to do with them, right?
Garlic is also pantry.
Garlic.
Garlic I would put in the pantry. You're right.
I put
In the fridge. Why?
I put my garlic in the fridge.
You're trying to copy.
Some people put it in the fridge.
Go in the pantry.
It'll last pretty well in the fridge. It'll last a lot longer in the pantry, actually.
What if you buy the Costco bag and then throw them in the freezer?
A bag of what?
Of garlic, already peeled.
Yeah.
If you've peeled, same with the onion. If you peeled it, put it in the fridge. It'll spoil pretty fast.
There's a
Yeah.
rare-
Also, if you peeled the potatoes, you put it in the fridge.
There's a
Definitely.
rare type
That's
of
true.
onion that if you peel it mostly, and then you pour water on it, then most of the skin will be see-through except for like the main layer.
Interesting.
That
All
sounds
right.
cool.
That's
Wow, you guys were listening. I'm so impressed. That's really awesome.
Yeah, no, I was asleep.
You still
So you
retained
still remembered. You remember
so
the
much
lettuce.
information.
Brain.
Okay.
All right, so we are gonna make some different things. So we have dried savory herbs. We have dried tea herbs and flowers, and then we also have some seed pods to turn into little packets of seeds. So we're gonna set up a couple stations at the tables, and we have enough for everybody to make each one if you want. So we can kind of move around the room and make different stuff.
You buy a lot of mason jars.
Well, we have some herb jars. I also have some little labels. We also have some little envelopes that you can use for your seeds. So we're gonna take just a minute to get set up.
Me
So if
too.
anyone needs to use the restroom or get some water, now's a
they're
good
great.
time.
And then I'm never gonna fill